Today we'll be working on lesson 4.8, which is solving radical equations. Remember, every time you want to solve a radical equation, first of all you have to isolate the radical term. Square or cube both sides, or basically whatever the index is. Solve for x and then check your solution if it makes sense. Plug it in. So let's start with number 1. Number 1, I need to isolate the radical. As you can see, it's isolated. Now, I have to, since the index is 2, then you have to square both sides to get rid of the radical. So you'll be left with the square and the radical cancel each other, so you'll be left with 7x minus 18 is equal to 5 squared, which is 25. Now, this is now like any other equation that you have been doing. So you just add 18 to both sides. You get that 7x is equal to 43. You divide by 7, so x would be 43 over 7. Now that's the solution. Now remember, after you do that, you need to check. It means you have to plug it in and check if it makes sense. So we're going to plug it in. Instead of x, I'm going to put 43 over 7 minus 18, and I'm going to check if it's going to give me 5. Now let's do this. Remember, the 7 and the 7 will cancel each other, so you'll be left with 43 minus 18. Now that would give you square root of 25, which is 5. So it did give you this number. So then the solution is x is equal to 43 over 7. Remember, you have to do that for every single equation. Now let's move on to number 2. Now, as you can see, number 2, there is something with the radical, so you need to isolate the radical. You do that by subtracting 1 from both sides, so you will get square root of 3x minus 8 is equal to 2. Then, since the index is 2, it means you have to square both sides. You will get 3x minus 8 is equal to 4. You add 8. So 3x is equal to 12. You divide by 3. Divide by 3, so you get that x is equal to 4. Now to check if your answer makes sense, you have to plug it in. Now let's see, 3 times 4 is a 12, minus 8 is a 4. So the square root of 4 is 2 plus 1 is 3. It did give me 3. If it helps you, go ahead and write it down. Now I'm not gonna plug it in for every single question, but I expect you to do that. You have to show your work. Now, so let's move on to number 3. Again, in order to solve, number 1 is that you need to isolate the radical. So, as you can see, there is a 24, so I need to get rid of it by adding 24 from both sides. So as you can see, you try to get rid of whatever is being subtracted or added first, and then you get rid of the 8. So it's going to be 8 cubic root of x is equal to 24. Now you need to get rid of the 8. So cubic root of x will give you 3. Now remember, we said in order to get rid of the radical, you use whatever number the index is. So since it's a 3, it means you raise this to the third and this to the third. Now, the cube and the radical will cancel each other since the power and the index are the same, so they cancel each other. So you are left with just x is equal to 3 cubed, which is 3 times 3 times 3, which is a 27. So x is 27. Now you cannot write this as a solution until you plug it in first. So cubic root of 27 is a 3. 3 times 8 is 24. Minus 24 does give you 0, so you write it down. So again, I expect you to show me all of the work. Now let's move on to... Now, I want you to try to do 4, 5, and 6 on your own, because it's basically the same concept. I want to make sure that you understand it. Now I'm going to move on to the other part, which is 4.8b. Now in this, it's the same lesson, but here you'll have more than one radical, more than one x. So let's try to do the first one together. Now as you can see, since the index is 2, so you raise both of them to the second power. So the 2 and the radical cancel each other, so you'll be left with 3x plus 1. Again, the square and the radical will cancel each other, so you'll be left with x plus 15. Now here you have to move the x to the other side, so you will group all the x's together. 3x minus x is a 2x. Now you move the 1 to the other side, because you want to group all the numbers together. So 15 minus 1 is 14. And then you divide by 2, so x is 7. Remember, you have to plug it in. I'm going to do this one with you. So, square root of 3 times 7 plus 1. I'm going to check if it's going to give me 7 plus 15. Now, 3 times 7 is 21 plus 1 is 22. So, so 21 plus 1 is 22. And 7 plus 15 is also 22. So as you can see, it is the same. So then I can accept this solution as being x equals 7. Now I want you to try to do number 2 on your own. Now as you can see, it's very similar to number 1. The only difference is that the two cubic roots are on the same side. So it would help if you move this to the other side, so the minus will become plus cubic root of x minus 24. This is a hint. And then since so you'll have only one radical on one side and another radical on the other side. And since the index is 3, you try to cube them to get rid of the radical, and then it would be the same idea. So try number 2 on your own. Now let's move on to the side. Now I want you to try 3 on your own, but I'm going to do 4, but 3 is just like 4. So let me do 4. Now, first of all, you need to isolate the radical, so you add x to both sides. So you will get 3 square root of x plus 1 is equal to 1 plus x. Now as you can see, you move the x to the other side. Now you have 1 plus x. So if you try to get rid of the 3 by dividing by 3, let me show you. If you divide by 3, you'll end up with like really confusing fractions. So I prefer if you just keep the 3 on this side. I'm not going to divide by it. I'm going to keep it. Since it's being multiplied, so you're fine. If it's being added or subtracted, you have to move it to the other side. But since it's multiplied, it's fine. Now, since this is a square root, so you need to square both sides to get rid of the radical. Now, remember, you are squaring the radical and the 3, so 3 to the power 2 is a 9. And then open parentheses, since you're squaring the radical, so the square will cancel the radical, so you'll only be left with x plus 1. Now here's the thing that I want you to pay attention to. Unfortunately, a lot of you still write 1 plus x to the power 2 as 1 plus x squared, and that is wrong. 1 plus x means 1 plus x into 1 plus x, so you need to FOIL it. So it would give you 1 plus, if you FOIL it, x plus x plus x squared. So that is, basically, if you combine it, it would be x squared plus 2x plus 1. So I'm going to erase over here. If you want, you can, I'm erasing so I can have more space to write, but you can go back in the video to check how I did that. Now you can distribute the 9, so you get 9x plus 1 is equal to x squared plus 2x plus 1. As you can see, I have a quadratic. So basically, isolating the x does not make sense. In this case, you have to move everything to one side and try to change it into, just move everything to one side. So you subtract 9x, and subtract 1, so you can move everything to one side. I think I made a mistake over here. When I distributed the 9, what did I do? I just put 9 times 1 as 1, so it should be 9. So when you subtract 9x, and you have to subtract 9, so basically move them all to one side. So nothing will be left on this side. 9 minus 9x is 0, 9 minus 9 is 0, so there's only 0 on this side. Now the other side, there's only 1x squared, so I'm going to write it down. Now 2x minus 9x is negative 7x, so I'm writing it down. So I'm combining the like terms. And 1 minus 9 is just negative 8, so I'm going to write it down. So as you can see, this is a quadratic equation. So in order to solve this, you have to think of two numbers. When you multiply, you get negative 8, and when you add, you would get negative 7. Now that would be negative 8 and 1. Now as you can see, a is just 1, so you don't need to divide by that, so the two factors are x minus 8 and x plus 1. So x can be either 8 or x can be negative 1. One of them or two of them or none of them might be the solution. To check, you have to plug it in. So let's do that. Make some room. So let's plug it in. I'm gonna write over here. So 3 square root instead of x. Now I'm gonna try the 8. So I'm gonna try the 8 first, see if it makes sense. 8 plus 1 minus 8 should give me 1. So let's see if it's gonna give me 1. 3 into 8 plus 1 is a 9. And then 3 into square root of 9 is a 3. So 9 minus 8 is 1. So when I plugged in 8, it did make sense. So x equals 8 is a solution. Now let's try if x is equal to negative 1. If x is equal to negative 1. Let me try it and plug it in. 3 square root of negative 1 plus 1. And there's a minus 1 on the outside. And I need to check if it's going to give me 1. So 3 into square root of 0 minus 1 is equal to square root of 0 is 0. This is 0 times 3 would give you a 0. So 0 minus 1 is negative 1. It did not give me 1. So then it's not a solution. So then we say that x equals negative 1 is an extraneous solution. Some of the questions will be like point out the extraneous solutions. In this case, x equals negative 1 is not a solution, it's an extraneous solution. It means when you solved you got it, but it does not make sense. So let's go back. I would prefer if you go back and watch this again. And try number 3, we'll discuss this more in class. Now let's move on to the word problem. Now if you read that for a spinning amusement park ride, the velocity v is in seconds, meter per seconds, and the r is the radius, and there's an equation which is v equals square root of ar. So they're saying for safety reasons a ride has a minimum acceleration, so they just gave you the a, which is 39.2, and then they gave you the velocity, which is 14. Now what's the smallest radius? So they're asking for r. Now let's plug everything in. V is equal to square root of ar. So v, which is 14, is equal to square root of 39.2r, and they need the r. So we need to get rid of the radical, so you square both sides. You'll get 14 square is going to be 196. I will let you use a calculator for a question like that. When you square a square root, the square root will be gone, so you get 39.2r. Now you need r, so you divide by 39.2 both sides. So you will get that r is equal to 5, but remember it's 5 meters, so that would be the solution. Now in number B is that they're asking for the acceleration, which is a, in meter per second square. And they're giving you the velocity, and they're giving you the radius. So meter per second is velocity, even if they didn't say it. And so try B on your own. It's the same concept. You plug in whatever they gave you, and you will only have one unknown. So try it, and we'll discuss this again in class.